The morning began quietly, the kind of calm that usually surrounded him before the world demanded his attention. He sat by the wide glass window, sipping warm tea, watching the city wake up beneath him. His days normally started the same way, with a strict routine that he never changed. It helped him stay focused, helped him control a life that had grown too big, too loud, and sometimes too overwhelming. But that morning something felt different, even before anything happened. It was a quiet feeling, almost like a whisper in the air, though he could not explain why. His assistant entered the room carrying the usual folders, reports, and schedules. She moved with quick steps, always prepared, always organized. But this time, she held something extra in her hand. A small envelope. No logo, no stamp. No printed address. Just his name written in simple handwriting. She stopped in front of his desk and placed the envelope gently on top of the papers. He woke earlier than usual the next morning, long before the sun rose. The sky outside his window was dark and quiet, the city still half asleep. He sat on the edge of his bed for a moment, holding a warm cup of tea, letting the steam brush against his face. Even though the day had barely started, his thoughts were already pulling him backward. Returning him to a time in his life he rarely visited, he found himself remembering the small house where he had grown up. The faded walls, the uneven roof, the small window where cold air used to slip through in winter. He remembered the sound of the old floorboards, the smell of simple meals, the silence that filled the nights when his family had nothing but hope to hold on to. Those memories were quiet now, but they returned like soft waves, touching him gently. He left his bedroom and walked into his study. The invitation still lay on the desk, right where he had placed it. The handwriting looked even simpler in the dim light of early morning and somehow more meaningful. He touched it again, but this time he did not feel confusion or hesitation. He felt clarity. He needed to go. As he prepared for his day, he didn't tell anyone what he was thinking. He simply got dressed, ate breakfast quietly, and went to his office the same way he did every morning. But everything around him felt a little different. He noticed the way people greeted him, the way they stepped aside, the way they assumed he would stay focused only on work. They didn't know what was on his mind. They didn't know he carried memories that were older than every success he had earned. When he stepped out of the elevator and walked toward his office, a young employee waiting in the hallway greeted him politely. He nodded, but his mind drifted again back to another hallway. One from his school days where the janitor used to mop the floors early in the morning. The sound of the wet mop sliding across old tiles echoed in his mind. He could almost smell the faint scent of cleaning soap. Inside his office, he placed his briefcase on the table. His assistant entered a few seconds later, holding his morning schedule. She began listing meetings, calls, and paperwork lined up for the day. But halfway through, she noticed his distant expression. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked gently. He nodded. "I'm fine. Just thinking." She hesitated before speaking again. "I've arranged the travel plans you asked for. Everything is prepared." He nodded again. "Good. Make sure it stays quiet. No one else needs to know." She gave a small, understanding smile. "Of course." The rest of the morning passed slowly. He attended a few meetings, discussed numbers, reviewed plans, and listened to presentations. But even as he nodded or offered advice, part of him stayed in the past. He remembered his small classroom, the broken desks, the chalk dust in the air, the tired teachers who tried their best every day. He remembered the lunches, sometimes skipped because he couldn't afford them. He remembered the evenings when he studied under weak light, hoping the electricity wouldn't cut out. He remembered the days he wanted to give up because school felt too hard and life felt too heavy. And he remembered the one person who always noticed when he struggled, the school janitor. The man had a gentle way of speaking. His voice was calm, never rushed. He wasn't someone the students thought about. Most of them passed him without saying anything, too busy with their own young lives. But for him, the janitor had been a quiet guardian. There had been a day when he came to school wearing worn-out shoes with holes in them. It was winter, and his toes were freezing inside. He tried to hide it by keeping his feet still, hoping no one would notice. But the janitor saw him limping on the way to class. "Everything all right?" the man had asked in a soft tone. He had nodded, pretending he was fine, but the man didn't believe him. Later that day, he found a pair of used but clean shoes placed near his desk with a simple note. "These might help. Don't worry about returning anything. Just stay warm." He had never forgotten that kindness. It had stayed with him, even when life pushed him into bigger worlds. That memory returned strongly now, almost as if it was happening again. He finished his work early and asked his assistant to delay all remaining meetings. She didn't question him. She simply nodded and handled everything quietly. She could tell he needed time alone. He left the office, taking a quiet elevator ride down to the lower floors, where fewer people worked. He walked to a small lounge area he had barely used in years. It had large windows overlooking the street below. Cars moved quickly, people hurried across crosswalks, the world moving in its usual busy rhythm. But he sat down and watched silently, his thoughts drifting deeper into memories. He remembered how the janitor had encouraged him when he was close to giving up on school. There had been a moment one he rarely talked about when he almost quit completely. His family was struggling, and he felt guilty spending time studying instead of working. He had been ready to walk away. One afternoon, he sat alone outside the school building. The janitor sat next to him without saying anything at first. He waited until the boy finally looked up. "Hard day?" the man asked. He nodded. "No." The janitor continued. "You're one of the brightest kids here. You see things others miss. Don't let go of that. One day, you're going to walk far from this town. Trust me on that." He didn't believe it at the time, but the janitor did. That belief had been a gentle push he needed. He sighed softly as he remembered it, feeling something warm and heavy in his chest. It wasn't sadness. It was gratitude, deep and old. Later that afternoon, he returned to his office and found his assistant sorting through documents. "Do you need anything else?" she asked. He paused. "Do you think people will question why I'm attending this event?" She thought for a moment, then replied, "Maybe. It's unusual for someone like you, but sometimes doing the unexpected is what makes something meaningful." Her words surprised him, mostly because they matched the feeling inside him. He thanked her quietly. He didn't usually express emotions openly in the office, but something about this moment felt different. When the day ended, he returned home earlier than usual. He walked through the quiet hallways of his house, noticing how still everything felt. The lights were warm, the rooms peaceful, the silence comforting. But deep inside, a part of him felt restless. He went to his library. A room lined with old books, soft chairs, and a large wooden desk. He sat down and closed his eyes. The janitor's face appeared in his memory calm, gentle, a little tired, but always smiling. He wondered how the man looked now after so many years. He wondered if life had been kind to him, if he had a family. If he had retired happily. He wondered if the man had sent the invitation knowing it would reach him, or if it had been sent out of routine, without any expectation. For a long moment, he said nothing. He just breathed. Then he opened his eyes and whispered to himself, "I have to do this." He stood, walked to his wardrobe, and began preparing clothes for the trip, simple ones, nothing that would attract attention. He didn't want to look like a man stepping into a place to show off. He wanted to walk into that small town the same way he once walked through it. Dusty roads. He spent the evening writing a small note. Not a speech, not a formal message, just a few words he felt he needed to say. He folded the paper and kept it safe. He didn't know if he would have the courage to read it aloud, but it felt important to write it. Later, he stepped out onto his balcony again. The night air was cool, the city lights glowing softly. He leaned on the railing and let the breeze touch his face. He thought about the long road his life had taken, from a small boy who carried books in a torn bag to a man who now signed contracts worth millions. He thought about how success had changed him, how it had shaped him, how it had taken him far away from his beginnings. But even now, after everything, some memories stayed untouched. The kind acts, the warm smiles, the simple words that gave him strength. He closed his eyes and whispered softly, almost like speaking to the wind, "I didn't forget." The next morning, he woke with a clearer mind. He packed his things, keeping everything simple. His assistant called to confirm the arrangements. The car would arrive soon. The flight would be quiet, unannounced. Before leaving his home, he looked around slowly, as if preparing himself for a journey not just across distance, but across time. As he stepped into the car, he felt something unusual, something he hadn't felt in years. A sense of return, not to a place, but to a part of himself he had left behind long ago. He didn't know what the day of the ceremony would bring. He didn't know how people would react. He didn't know if the janitor would remember him, but he knew one thing with certainty. He was going back to honor someone who had changed his life with the smallest kindness, and though the world might not understand his decision, he didn't care. Some journeys were meant to be taken quietly. Some gratitude was meant to be expressed in person. And this time, he was ready. "This came early this morning," she said softly. "Someone delivered it by hand. Security checked. There's nothing harmful inside. But it's unusual." He looked up at her, confused. People hardly ever sent him handwritten letters. Most communication came through formal emails, official documents, digital signatures, or scheduled meetings. He rarely received anything personal, and certainly not something that looked so plain. He reached for the envelope, turning it slowly between his fingers. The paper felt rough, almost old-fashioned, the kind of paper used by people who still believed in quiet gestures. He opened it carefully, sliding out a folded card. Inside, the writing was neat and steady. The words, simple. It was an invitation. A small-town community event. A retirement ceremony for a school janitor. He read the name at the bottom twice. The name felt familiar, like a memory from far, far away, but he could not place it at first. His assistant waited, expecting him to laugh or set it aside. But he didn't. Instead, he stayed quiet, his eyes fixed on the card as if the ink held a secret. "Should I send a polite decline?" his assistant asked after a moment. He didn't answer. He kept reading the invitation, going over the simple lines again. There was no formal request, no fancy wording, no mention of who he had become. It was written the way people write when they don't expect anything in return. The assistant frowned a little. She'd worked for him long enough to sense his moods, but this silence was different. He usually decided things quickly. He never hesitated. Whether it was signing a contract, approving a major project, or responding to important organizations, he rarely took more than a minute. But this time, he didn't move. He leaned back slowly in his chair, holding the card loosely in his hands. He stared at it as if it had pulled him into another time. Her curiosity grew stronger. She stepped a little closer. "Do you know this person?" she asked softly. He finally looked up. His eyes were distant, the way people look when memories suddenly return. He didn't answer directly. He just said, "Leave it with me. I need a moment." She nodded, then left the room quietly, leaving him alone with the card. The door closed, and the silence grew heavier. He placed the card on his desk and stared at it. That name? He had not seen it in years. Many years. Not since he had been a boy in a small town, living a life so far from the world he lived in now. He had changed so much that sometimes he felt like that child had belonged to another lifetime entirely. But the name brought a warmth to his chest. A quiet but powerful feeling he had not felt in a long time. He stood up slowly and walked to the window again. The city stretched far below, a world of tall buildings, fast cars, and endless noise. A world he had built through hard work, sacrifice, and discipline. But behind all the success, behind the wealth and the influence, there were parts of his life he rarely visited in his mind. He had grown up in a place so small that most people would never find it on a map. A place where children wore hand-me-down clothes, where families shared everything, where people knew each other's names and stories. Life there had been hard but simple, and he had carried those memories like old photographs, stored deep in a drawer. He hadn't thought about the school janitor in years. Not because he didn't care, but because life had pulled him so far away. Burying the past under layers of responsibility, as he stared at the city, he felt a strange pull. A tug from the past, asking to be remembered. He sat down again and read the card once more. The handwriting. The gentle tone. The simple invitation. It didn't ask him to speak or donate or appear in public. It was simply an invitation to attend. Nothing more, nothing less. He imagined the small community hall where the event would be held. Folding chairs, the paper decorations, the warm but humble gathering of people who lived simple lives. People who worked hard every day without expecting anything. Extraordinary. The opposite of his life now. He tapped his fingers on the desk softly, thinking. He remembered something a moment from his childhood. A cold morning when he arrived at school, shivering because he didn't have a proper jacket. The janitor had noticed and wrapped an old scarf around his shoulders without saying much. He remembered the man's warm smile, the quiet kindness, the encouragement that came without judgment, small acts that had shaped him. More than he realized, he closed his eyes for a moment. He could almost see the school hallway again, could almost hear the man's calm voice. He opened his eyes slowly. Something inside him softened. His assistant returned after a while with more documents. She paused when she saw him still sitting with the card. "Should I prepare your schedule for the week?" she asked carefully. He picked up the invitation and held it for a second. Then he looked at her, his face unreadable. "I'm going," he said simply. She blinked. "Sorry, you mean to this?" He nodded. "Clear my schedule for that day. Book the trip." Quietly, no media. No press. She stared at him, stunned. In all her years working for him, she had seen him decline invitations from presidents, business leaders, international organizations, global events. He had turned down award ceremonies, private galas, and charity dinners. He preferred working silently, staying out of unnecessary spotlight. But this simple retirement ceremony in a small town he was choosing to attend, "Are you sure?" she asked gently, not out of doubt, but out of shock. "Yes," he said. "I owe something to this man. Something I have never repaid." She said nothing more. She left to make the arrangements. Still processing the unexpected decision, he sat alone again, holding the card between his fingers. For a while, he didn't move. His mind drifted to the past, to the dusty hallways of the old school, to the kind eyes of a man who had seen a struggling boy and chosen to help him quietly. He had always believed that life was shaped by choices, big choices. Difficult choices, brave choices. But now he understood something else. Sometimes life was shaped by small moments and gentle hands. The rest of the day moved slowly. He attended meetings, discussed plans, signed documents, but his mind kept returning to the invitation. His staff whispered among themselves, surprised by the shift in his usually predictable behavior. Later that evening, as he walked through his home, he found himself stopping in front of an old photo frame tucked in a corner shelf. The picture showed him as a boy, standing outside his childhood school, wearing the second-hand jacket someone had given him. He remembered that day clearly. The janitor had stood behind the photographer, telling him to smile. He touched the frame gently. The boy in the picture had never imagined becoming who he was now. Never imagined stepping into glass towers, signing deals, or being recognized around the world. All he had dreamed of was a chance to study, a chance to change his life, a chance someone had helped him find. He felt a warmth in his chest again, almost like gratitude rising after years of silence. He knew that attending the ceremony would surprise people. It would make his employees wonder. It might even confuse the public if word got out. But none of that mattered. This wasn't about the world. This wasn't about business. This wasn't about reputation. This was personal. Late at night, he sat on his balcony, looking at the stars hidden behind the city lights. He wondered how many years had passed since he last saw the janitor. He wondered if the man even remembered him. He wondered if the invitation had been sent on purpose, or if it had reached him by accident. But deep inside, he felt it didn't matter. What mattered was that he had a chance to say something he had never said. "Thank you," the next morning. His assistant handed him the travel details. The arrangements were simple, just the way he wanted. A quiet trip, no attention. When he nodded in approval, she gave him a small smile. "It's good," she said softly. "Sometimes going back helps us move forward." He didn't answer, but her words stayed with him. He looked at the invitation one last time before placing it carefully in his briefcase. Not as a task, not as an obligation, but almost like something precious. He had been invited not as a billionaire, not as a successful man, not as someone important, but as a boy who had once been helped by a simple act of kindness. And now, his response would stun everyone around him. He was finally going back. The journey to the small town began before sunrise. The road was quiet, and the sky slowly shifted from darkness to a soft, pale blue. He sat in the back seat of the car, looking out the window as the city faded behind him. The tall buildings grew smaller in the distance until they vanished completely, replaced by long fields, old farmhouses, and narrow roads that twisted gently through open land. It had been many years since he had traveled this way. Most of his recent trips were for business flights, luxury hotels, clean conference rooms, meetings filled with polished smiles and careful conversations. But this journey felt different. It felt like peeling back the layers of time, returning to a place where life used to be simple. Even if it was difficult, his assistant sat in the front seat, reviewing travel plans quietly. She had insisted on coming with him, not because he needed help, but because she felt he should not travel alone for something so personal. She didn't speak much during the ride. She understood that he needed space for his thoughts as the car continued. The roads became narrower, lined with tall trees that cast long shadows across the ground. He remembered walking along similar roads as a child, carrying his worn-out school bag, kicking stones on the way, sometimes running when he was late, sometimes dragging his feet when he was tired. Those memories came back easily now, as if they had simply been waiting for him to return. After a few hours, they arrived at the town. It looked almost the same as he remembered. Small shops with faded signs, people sitting outside, small cafes, children running along dusty streets. The buildings were old, but there was a warmth to them, a feeling of familiarity he had forgotten he missed. The car slowed as they drove through the center of town. A few people looked curiously at the dark sedan with tinted windows. Visitors were not common here, especially not ones who traveled this way, but no one recognized him yet. That was good. He wanted to walk into this day quietly, without attention. They reached the small community hall, a simple building with large windows and a sign that looked like it had been painted by hand. A few cars were parked outside, and people were already gathering inside. There were children carrying small decorations, parents trying to arrange chairs, and some older residents standing near the entrance chatting with each other. He took a deep breath. The moment felt heavier than he expected. "Are you ready?" His assistant asked softly. He nodded, though he wasn't sure if he truly was. When he stepped out of the car, a cool breeze brushed across his face. The air smelled different here, cleaner, softer, almost nostalgic. He walked toward the hall with slow steps, taking in every detail around him. Inside, the atmosphere was lively. People greeted each other warmly. Children ran around with excitement, holding balloons or helping set up the stage. A small banner hung across the front that read, "Thank you for your years of service." He paused near the entrance, watching the scene quietly. The hall was not large, but it was filled with warmth. It wasn't decorated with expensive lights or grand structures. Just simple paper decorations, handmade cards from children, and a few flowers arranged in small vases. But somehow, it felt far more genuine than any event he had attended in his adult life. No one noticed him at first. People walked past him, carrying chairs or laughing with friends. He felt invisible in a way he hadn't felt in years. It was strangely comforting. Then someone glanced at him, did a double take, and froze. A middle-aged man near the refreshments table stared with wide eyes. He nudged the woman next to him and whispered something. She gasped softly and covered her mouth with her hand. More people noticed. Whispers spread quickly. "Is that really him? What's he doing here? It can't be, can it?" He could feel their eyes on him, but he kept walking calmly, offering polite nods to those who greeted him nervously. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He wasn't here for attention. He was here for one person. Suddenly, an older man stepped into view from behind the stage area. His hair was gray now, thinner than before, and his back was slightly bent. But his face was the same. The janitor. He stood near a chair, talking to a few people around him. He wore a simple shirt and a warm smile. He looked peaceful, perhaps a little tired. But his eyes held the same gentle light they always had. When the janitor finally noticed him, he blinked in surprise. His mouth parted slightly, and he took a slow step forward. The hall grew quiet as people watched the two men. Everyone expected some kind of formal introduction, maybe a speech or an announcement. But the moment did not unfold that way. The billionaire walked toward the janitor slowly. When he reached him, he did not extend his hand for a formal handshake. Instead, he simply said quietly, "It's been a long time." The janitor's eyes softened. "You came all this way?" He nodded. "I had to. I couldn't miss this." The older man smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You didn't need to come, but I'm glad you did." There were no dramatic reactions, no loud applause, no flash of cameras. Just two people reconnecting after many years, standing in the middle of a small community hall filled with curious but respectful onlookers. He felt something warm inside his chest, quiet comfort. Almost like closing an open chapter in his heart. The janitor gestured toward a seat. "Come, sit. You must be tired from the journey." "I'm fine, but thank you." They walked to a corner of the hall where it was quieter. The janitor sat slowly, and he took the seat next to him. "You've changed a lot," the janitor said gently. "Life has been busy," he replied. "I see that," the older man said with a chuckle. "But you still look like the same boy who used to worry about schoolwork more than anyone else." He felt his throat tighten a little. "Those were hard times," as the janitor agreed softly. "But you made it through. I knew you would." He looked at the man beside him, studying the lines on his face, the warmth in his expression, the quiet strength in his voice. All these years later, the janitor still carried the same gentle presence. "I never thanked you," he said quietly. The janitor shook his head. "There was nothing to thank me for. You were just a child trying to learn. I only did what I could." "It meant more than you think," he replied. "Your kindness helped me at a time when I had very little. I never forgot it." The janitor looked down for a moment, touched by the words. When he lifted his head again, his eyes looked a bit watery. "You made your own path," he said softly. "I only gave small things shoes, a scarf, a little encouragement. You did the rest." He shook his head. "Sometimes small things make the biggest difference." The janitor smiled again, and they sat quietly for a moment, both lost in thoughts of the past. People around the hall continued to prepare for the event. Some looked at them with curiosity. Some whispered to each other. But no one interrupted. They could sense that the moment was important. After some time, one of the organizers walked over and asked the janitor to come backstage for final preparations. The older man stood slowly and touched the billionaire's shoulder lightly. "Stay," he said. "I'll be right back," he nodded. While he waited, he walked around the hall, observing the decorations. He saw drawings from children thanking the janitor for helping them. He saw photos from past school events showing the janitor smiling in the background, never seeking attention but always present. He felt a deep admiration for the man, a quiet hero, someone who had spent years helping others without expecting anything. His assistant approached him. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Better than all right? People here are surprised to see you," she said. "But they also seem happy you came," he nodded. "I didn't come for them, but I'm glad if it means something to them, too." The event soon began. People took their seats, children settled down, and soft music played through old speakers. The janitor walked to the front of the hall, greeted with warm applause and cheers. The billionaire felt something tighten in his chest. As he watched the man stand on the simple stage, he remembered all the years the janitor had walked those school hallways quietly, doing work most people never noticed now. He was being celebrated not with luxury or glamour, but with genuine love. The host began speaking, sharing stories about the janitor's years of service. Children talked about how he fixed their broken bikes. Teachers shared how he always arrived early to prepare the classrooms. Parents spoke about how he comforted students on difficult days. Every story painted the same picture: a man who had lived his life helping others. He listened with deep respect. At one point, the host asked if anyone wanted to share their experience. A few people went up: students, teachers, townsfolk. Their words were simple, but full of warmth. Then the host looked toward where the billionaire sat. "Would you like to say something?" the host asked nervously. The hall grew silent. Everyone turned to him. He stood slowly, feeling every pair of eyes watching him. He had spoken in front of thousands, spoken at global conferences, stood on grand stages, but this felt different. When he walked toward the front, the janitor looked at him with quiet surprise. He stopped beside the older man, took a deep breath, and prepared to speak. He did not know exactly what he would say yet, but he knew one thing. Today, he would honor the man who once honored him with simple kindness, and nothing in his successful life had ever felt as important as this moment. The hall became quiet, in a way. It felt almost unreal. Everyone had seen the unexpected arrival of the billionaire, and many were still whispering to each other, trying to understand why someone like him would travel all the way to a small town just for a simple retirement ceremony. But they had no idea that the moment was about to grow even more surprising. As the host spoke warmly about the retiring janitor and invited people to come up if they wished to say something, most people simply clapped. A few stood, ready to share short memories. But before anyone else could move, the billionaire rose from his seat. The room froze. No one expected him to stand. No one imagined he would speak. Even his assistant, who had accompanied him, looked up in shock. The janitor stared with wide eyes, unsure what was happening. The billionaire didn't rush. He took slow steps toward the front of the hall, each footstep sounding louder than it should, almost as if the air itself had quieted for him. People moved out of the way, some whispering, some holding their breath. No one knew what he would talk about, and yet everyone felt something big was about to unfold. When he reached the small wooden stage, he didn't climb it. Instead, he stood next to it, facing the crowd as though he wanted to be on the same level as everyone else. His posture was calm, but his eyes held a softness most of the world had never seen from him. "Thank you for letting me speak," he began, his voice clear and gentle. For a moment, nobody moved. It was almost strange to see one of the richest men in the country speaking in such a humble room, with faded paint and plastic chairs. "I didn't come here to make a big moment," he continued. "I came here because I owe something to someone in this room, something I never repaid." The audience exchanged confused glances. A few people leaned forward, eager to hear more. The janitor, standing near the front, looked overwhelmed, already sensing what was coming. "When I was a young boy," the billionaire said, "my life wasn't easy. My family struggled. Some days, even getting to school felt impossible. There were nights I went to bed hungry. Days when I didn't know if I could stay in school because we didn't have enough money for books, for clothes, for anything. I was just a kid who didn't know what tomorrow would look like." People listened silently. It was rare to hear the billionaire talk about his past. Interviews never reached this depth, but in that difficult time, he continued, there was someone who helped me without expecting anything back. Someone who noticed when I was cold and gave me an extra sweater the school wasn't using. Someone who slipped an old notebook into my bag when he thought I wouldn't see. Someone who didn't speak much but always looked at me with kindness. He paused. The room remained quiet. "That person," he said slowly, "is the man retiring today." A gasp went through the hall. The janitor grabbed the edge of a chair for support. Completely stunned, the billionaire looked at him with gratitude that seemed to come from the deepest part of his heart. "You didn't know who I would become," he said to him. "You didn't know what my life would one day look like. But you helped me anyway. Your kindness followed me through every step of my journey. You might not remember every moment, but I remember all of them. And I came here today to say thank you for everything." The janitor's eyes filled with tears. He covered his mouth with his hand, unable to speak. The crowd watched the emotional scene with warm hearts, feeling something powerful move between the two men. The billionaire turned back to the audience. "I think we often underestimate the impact of small acts," he said. "This man didn't give me millions. He didn't open business doors for me. But he gave me hope. He gave me dignity when I had very little. He showed me that kindness doesn't need a reason. And that changed my life." The audience remained absorbed, many wiping tears carefully to avoid drawing attention. Then he took a slow breath, preparing for something that no one expected. "I want to do something today," he said. "Not for myself. Not even as a gift, but as a tribute to the man who taught me the value of compassion." He turned toward the janitor with a warm smile. "In your honor," he said, "I am setting up a scholarship for every child in this town who needs help to continue their education. Whether they struggle like I did or simply need a little support, they will have it. And every scholarship will carry your name." A wave of shock moved through the hall. Parents stared at each other with wide eyes. Teachers clasped their hands together in disbelief. Young students looked at each other as though their futures had suddenly opened in front of them. The janitor slowly shook his head, overwhelmed and emotional. I didn't do anything special," he whispered. "You did," the billionaire replied gently. "More than you know." The entire room erupted into applause, loud, heartfelt, and filled with the kind of emotion that makes a moment unforgettable. The sound bounced off the walls, filling the hall with warmth and gratitude. But the billionaire wasn't finished. He waited until the applause faded, then spoke again, this time with a softness that made every person lean closer. "I don't want this to be seen as grand," he said. "The real honor belongs to him. I am only here because one man chose kindness over indifference. One man offered a child a sense of belonging when the world didn't. That is worth more than anything I have built." Some people cried openly now. Others whispered comforting words to those beside them. The janitor wiped his eyes again, completely touched. After stepping away from the center of the room, the billionaire walked straight toward the janitor. Without hesitation, he wrapped him in a warm hug. The room went silent for a second. Then applause broke out again, this time softer, more emotional. As if everyone understood how much that embrace meant, the janitor whispered something into his ear. It's too quiet for others to hear. But the billionaire nodded, smiling with deep emotion, as though the words carried more meaning than anyone could imagine. For the rest of the ceremony, the billionaire stayed like any other guest. He listened to speeches, laughed at stories from the school staff, and even helped carry a box of old items the janitor had collected over the years. The crowd watched him in disbelief. He wasn't standing above anyone. He was simply part of them. Children approached him shyly, and he bent down to talk to them. Parents thanked him, but he politely redirected the praise to the janitor, insisting the day belonged to him. Later, when the event ended, people didn't rush to leave. They lingered, wanting to hold on to the moment a bit longer. It wasn't every day that someone so powerful showed such humility and gratitude. The janitor's family took pictures with him and the billionaire. Some neighbors asked for a group photo, and he agreed without hesitation. But what touched everyone the most was how he treated the janitor not as a former school worker, not as someone from his past, but as someone who mattered deeply. Even the assistant, who had known the billionaire for years, quietly admitted she had never seen him this open, this emotional, this human. As the sun started to set, the hall began to empty. The remaining people cleaned up leftover cups and decorations. The janitor walked the billionaire to the exit, the two of them sharing quiet stories from the past before leaving. The billionaire placed a gentle hand on the janitor's shoulder. "You gave me light when I needed it," he said softly. "I will never forget that." The janitor smiled, his eyes watery. "I'm proud of you," he replied. "Not because of your success, but because you remembered." The billionaire nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then he got into his car, but not before taking one last look at the simple hall where one of the most meaningful moments of his life had just happened. As the car drove away, The people of the town remained standing outside, waving and talking with excitement. But beneath their excitement, something deeper was settling in, a renewed belief in kindness, in gratitude, in the idea that even the smallest actions can create lasting ripples. And though the billionaire had left the town behind for the night, the story of what he had shared, what he had revealed, and what he had given would live on long after the lights in the hall went out. The sun had fully set by the time the billionaire's car disappeared down the quiet road, leaving behind a glow of warmth among the people still gathered outside the hall. They slowly drifted away, talking softly, still moved by everything they had seen. But for the janitor, the night felt like a dream he couldn't quite believe was real. Even after the applause faded and the crowd thinned, the emotions stayed with him, strong and unforgettable. The next morning, news of the billionaire's visit spread beyond the town. People shared videos and short clips taken on their phones. And although the billionaire never sought publicity, the sincerity of the moment touched many hearts. Still, in the town itself, things remained simple. Neighbors talked about the scholarship fund with grateful smiles. Parents walked their children to school with new hope. Teachers discussed how many students could benefit from the new support. The janitor woke up early, as he always did despite being officially retired. Old habits stayed with him, and it felt strange knowing he didn't need to put on his uniform anymore. He made himself a cup of tea, sat near the window, and let the warm steam rise into the cool morning air. His thoughts kept drifting back to the billionaire's speech, to the words filled with gratitude. To the boy he remembered helping and how he never expected that boy to become one of the richest men in the country. He had never helped him for recognition. He had never expected anything in return. It was simply something he felt in his heart at the time, a quiet sense of responsibility toward a young child struggling through life. And now, so many years later, that same child had returned as a grown man, carrying the weight of success and memories that still mattered. Later in the day, the janitor's family came over to his home. They brought food, hugs, and excited stories they had heard around town. His daughter told him that local reporters were calling her, asking for interviews. His grandson proudly said that his friends talked about the event nonstop. But for the janitor, the most touching moment had already happened the night before. No interview or headline could ever compare. "Are you happy, Grandpa?" the boy asked him. The janitor nodded slowly and smiled. "Yes, very happy." Meanwhile, in the city, the billionaire returned to his routine. Meetings waited for him, calls needed to be answered, and documents filled his desk. But something inside him felt lighter. He didn't rush through things as he usually did. He also didn't go straight into planning or focusing on projects. Instead, he took a quiet moment alone in his office. He pulled out a small notebook from a drawer. Its cover was worn out, nearly falling apart. It was the same notebook the janitor had slipped into his bag decades earlier when he was a struggling child. Through all the years of building his empire, he had kept it tucked away, safe. Whenever he faced difficult days, he would look at it and remember that kindness still existed in the world. Seeing the janitor again made him feel grounded, like he had returned to the core of who he really was. He thought about how different his life might have been if that man had not shown him kindness. He thought about the children in the town who might receive the scholarship and how their futures could change over the following days. The billionaire worked with his team to set up the scholarship fund properly. He didn't want it to be a simple one-time donation. He wanted it to last for generations, to grow, to expand, to help more children over the years. He insisted that the janitor's name be placed proudly on every document, every certificate, every announcement. People around him respected his decision. Some were surprised, but as they learned the story, they understood the depth of his gratitude. A week later, the billionaire made a quiet visit back to the small town. He didn't tell reporters or announce it publicly. He simply arrived early in the morning, dressed casually, carrying a small box. He walked down the familiar school hallway. Even though it had been renovated many times since his childhood, the janitor was there, sitting on a bench outside the principal's office, sipping his tea. When he looked up and saw the billionaire walking toward him, his eyes widened in surprise. "You came back?" the janitor said. "I had something to give you," the billionaire replied with a smile. He handed the janitor the box. Inside was a beautifully made plaque with a simple message. Asterisk for the kindness that changed a life. For the compassion that lit the path of a child, thank you. Asterisk. The janitor ran his hand gently over the plaque, touched in a way he couldn't express. You didn't have to do this, he said softly. I know, the billionaire replied. But I wanted to. They sat together for a while, talking about old times and new things. The billionaire shared how he planned to visit often, not as a famous figure, but as someone who still cared about the place that shaped him. And the janitor shared stories from his long years working at the school, stories that made the billionaire laugh warmly. As they talked, a few children arrived early to school. They saw the billionaire and gasped, whispering to each other. He waved at them with a smile, then spent a few minutes chatting with the curious ones who approached. One boy asked, Is it true you're giving money so kids like us can go to school? Yes, the billionaire answered gently. Every kid deserves a chance. The boy grinned. Thank you. My mom said this will help a lot of families. The billionaire's heart warmed. He looked at the janitor, who smiled back at him after leaving the school. The billionaire visited the small neighborhood where he once lived. Most of the houses had changed, but a few still stood as he remembered them. He walked past the old bakery where he used to buy bread when he had a little money saved. He passed the empty lot where he once played with other children. Memories came back in waves, some happy, some difficult, all meaningful. He realized how far he had come, yet how important it was never to forget the road behind him. Over the following months, the scholarship program took shape. Students from the town began applying. Teachers helped guide parents through the forms. The community felt united in a new way, inspired by the billionaire's gesture, moved by the janitor's legacy. The janitor himself became something of a local hero. People who had known him for years now looked at him with a new kind of respect. His simple acts of kindness had become a story that touched hearts across the region, but he didn't let it change him. He still lived in the same modest house, still greeted neighbors warmly, still helped children who passed by his yard. Fame didn't matter to him. What mattered was seeing the children in the town given a chance he once helped give a young boy many years ago. One afternoon, the billionaire invited the janitor and his family to a small celebration in the city. It wasn't grand or flashy. It was just a quiet gathering to honor the start of the scholarship fund. The janitor was shy at first, unused to being the center of attention. But the billionaire made sure he felt comfortable. During the event, the billionaire again thanked him in front of a small group of people. I am who I am today because someone chose kindness when I needed it most, he said. This man taught me that you don't need power or wealth to change a life. You just need a heart willing to care. People applauded softly, touched by the sincerity of his words as the event ended. The billionaire and the janitor stood side by side, watching sunlight reflect off the tall city buildings. The janitor felt humbled by the moment, knowing he had never aimed for anything like this. The billionaire felt grateful, knowing he had fulfilled a promise he carried silently for many years before they said goodbye. The billionaire placed a hand on the janitor's shoulder. You gave me strength when I had none, he said. Now, I want to be that strength for others. The janitor nodded, his eyes soft. You already are. The next year brought even more stories. A young girl became the first scholarship student to travel outside the town for higher studies. A boy who once struggled in school found new motivation because he felt someone believed in him. Families wrote letters filled with gratitude. Every time the billionaire visited the town, he brought updates about new students joining the program. And every time, the janitor listened quietly, smiling with pride. The two men formed a rare friendship, one built on gratitude, kindness, and memories that time had not erased. They visited each other often, shared meals, and talked about life with a simplicity that had nothing to do with wealth or status. One day, during a quiet conversation, the janitor said, Life has a way of bringing things back to us, doesn't it? The billionaire nodded. Yes, and sometimes it brings us back to the people we needed the most. As the years passed, the scholarship grew bigger, helping hundreds of students. The janitor's story became a gentle reminder to many. Kindness is never wasted. The impact of a simple gesture can live on far longer than anyone imagines. And though the billionaire continued to build companies and change industries, he always carried the same notebook. The old one the janitor gave him as a reminder of where he started and of the man who cared. In the end, the legacy of both men lived in the hearts of countless children whose lives had been touched by their story. The billionaire had wealth, but the janitor had given him something deeper: hope, compassion, and the belief that a small act of kindness can change everything. And that belief, shared now with the world, became the greatest gift of all.